Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Midtown Scholar Bookstore. My name is Alex. I'm with The Scholar. Thank you for joining us this evening for a very special program. We're happy you're here with us in Harrisburg, and we hope you enjoy tonight's program with not one, not two, but three Pennsylvania poet laureates. Before we get started tonight, we do have some quick housekeeping. First, we have many events coming up at the bookstore. In the next few months, we'll be hosting Colson Whitehead, James McBride, Ruth Ware, Riley Sager, and more. Please visit our website for more details. Take an events flyer up at the front table as you leave, and stay tuned to our social media pages, website, and newsletter for updates and announcements. Second, I'd like to give a special shout out to Evita Colon, who's there with us this evening. She'll be our second reader tonight. She just opened her very own bookstore in Lancaster called A Concrete Rose Book Bar, which is the nation's first Black bookstore, micro winery, and intimate performance space centering the African diaspora. Please look them up and visit them in Lancaster. Again, they're A Concrete Rose Book Bar in Lancaster. And I'd also like to give a shout out. We have Evita's magazine here for sale up at the cafe. They're only $10, so please go ahead and support Evita. Thank you. Lastly, a few topics for tonight. We're going to open with readings from Rick Kearns, followed by Evita, and then our main act, Philadelphia Poet Laureate Airea D. Matthews. The collection that we are here for this evening by Airea is titled Bread and Circus, which Hanif Abdurraqib calls, quote, a stunning collection of work which feels both ahead of its time and also abundantly on time. We have copies of Bread and Circus available for sale at the cafe counter, and we'll have a book signing with Airea following the event. We please encourage you to consider supporting the bookstore, our staff, and our author this evening by purchasing a copy of the book. But now I'm happy to introduce our first reader this evening. Rick Kearns, aka Kearns Morales, is a writer and teacher of Puerto Rican and European heritage from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. His poems have appeared in over 70 literary publications, most in the US, but a few in Ireland, UK, Puerto Rico, and Argentina. 2 of his poems have been recognized in national contests, and he was named Poet Laureate of Harrisburg in 2014. As a freelance journalist, he has written for daily, weekly, and monthly news publications since 1986. In the 21st century, his work has focused on Latino and Native American issues. From 2006 to 2017, Kearns wrote about indigenous Latin American issues for Indian Country Today Media Network, the nation's largest Native American news publication. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Harrisburg Poet Laureate Rick Kearns to the stage.
Thank you. Thanks for that lovely introduction. I've got one old piece and a few newer sort of pandemic pieces that I wanted to share. The first one is a poem I wrote for the Spanish poet Federico Garcia Lorca. It was his birthday just a few days ago. And this was also the title of a CD I with a jazz band. Did I just lose power there for a second? Anyway, this is my poem for Lorca. It's a short one. I'll read the one in English first and then the Spanish language version. This is called The Moon Rides a Black Horse. The moon is riding along the shore, thinking violins and howling wolves. The moon is riding a black horse, looking for a widow who sings the deep song, llanto of the unforgiving sea, bulería of smokestacks and isotopes. The moon wants a good red wine and a woman who can dance. La luna cabalga un potro negro. La luna cabalga a lo largo de la costa, imaginando violines y lobos aullantes. La luna cabalga un potro oscuro, buscando una viuda que canta la profunda canción del mar que no perdona. Bulerías de las columnas de humo, de las fábricas e isotopos. La luna desea el buen vino rojo y también una mujer que puede bailar. Thank you. And I have a few pandemic pieces that I wanted to have put them in the light of day This one was written pretty close to the time of the election, of the last presidential election. And this is called Something Like Hope. As I was reading Michael's expansive poem, the D string snapped on my guitar. The snapping string could be a portent or not. I can't make up my mind. John Prine is gone. Hello up there. Bernie has taken a gracious bow on the day before Passover begins as we enter week 3 of quarantine. Are these signs, signals illuminating the collapse of the market as God phenomena? I don't know. Although I will miss John, and thankfully Bernie's still slugging it out with the money changers and the corporoidal Pharisees. I don't know if the virus that kills bodies and lives, that depends on a system built for endless consumption, with human concerns as a marketing tool, will itself mutate and crush us a different way. I don't know. But we need to find a new way of running a nation that places a premium on justice and the earth. I want to live in a world that's safe for children and families and guitars and weeping cherry trees. John Prine has left the building. Bernie fights the good fight and the plague flies across the earth during Passover. Round the corner from Easter and resurrection, but old strings will continue to snap and slice the gloved hand. We'll continue to shoot past the masked people who are hoping that something new will emerge from the haunted cities and 24/7 mourning. Something like hope, something. Thanks. And another cheery piece. Yeah, the lockdown really did a number on me, like with most people. And this one is more about social media, but it was written at that time. It's called Online Ghosts. Joseph, who took his life 5 years ago, still has a page on Facebook. Death has not removed his profile. The fact that he hung himself at night in a barn has no bearing on his social media presence. Are there ghosts on Facebook? Do the dead still post? I don't know. I don't know how to deal with these cyber ghosts. I played a cigarilla for an old friend who is long gone, but his page lives on. I recorded it onto Messenger, a PM to a dead friend who used to play an agonizingly beautiful cigarilla, one of the old flamenco songs that rose out of the mountains with the help of duende and sherry and pain. Do the ghosts on Facebook haunt the cloud? Do they fly through the air on e-currents? I'd like to think my dead friends check their pages, but I'm not holding my breath. No, it's okay. And okay, this last one, I should mention one or two things. In the 70s, from the late 60s through the 70s, there was a terrible thing that was happening in the South Bronx in New York. That is, lots of factories were disappearing, lots of jobs were going, and there were all kinds of abandoned buildings, and it became, there were sections of the Bronx that looked like what Dresden looked like after the firebombing in World War II. And I mentioned a friend of mine who had left during that time and then came back, but he's just one part of the story. This is called Coyotes of the Bronx. Coyotes of the Bronx. I had to repeat that phrase a few times before it registered on the screen between my eyes. I had to do a double take, reading about coyotes appearing in the Republic, La República del Bronx, that exists in real time, very real time. My friend Arturo's home was a big building in the southern section of La República, near the border with the Big Island. He left in the early 70s before the fires flamed out across the area near his home, near the empty factories with broken glass, glittery death. Arturo came back 1985, told me, I went looking for my neighborhood and it was gone. Just rubble and dust and ghosts on crack. I mean, now you see it, now you don't. I kept blinking, rubbing my eyes. As he was telling me his barrio ghost story, I remembered coyotes. I first heard them howling a few yards beyond my uncle's backyard in Tucson, Arizona, 1978. Hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My next coyote sighting a few years later, at night on a mesa outside of the city with 3 equally stoned Arapahoes who were generally hilarious. The 3 native comedians enjoyed my jumpy reactions to the nighttime desert sounds, especially the sudden appearance of coyotes in the near distance. I'd see them and turn to say, hey, look, man, turn around, they were gone. A matter of seconds, I kept looking and looking, even walking in their direction. Nada, not a damn thing. Happened at least a dozen times in the course of a happily deranged mushrooms at midnight extravaganza. Now you see them, now you don't. And now they're here in La República, hiding in deep forests, hunting at night, plenty of good eats. Our new old neighbors are mostly part wolf, maybe descendants of the first wolf neighbors of Lenape communities on the Big Island. And like the Lenape, the wolves were killed or forced out further and further until they seemed to disappear into thin air. Thin, blood-soaked air. Now you see them. Now they see you. And they do. The coyotes are getting kind of bold in the Bronx, and it just trips me out. Okay, so my next task here is to introduce a wonderful young writer. Evita Colon, Lancaster's first poet laureate, is a multi-talented creative entrepreneur, poet, and founder of Speak to My Soul, LLC, BLK Voices Magazine, and A Concrete Rose, the first Black bookstore, micro winery, and performance venue. A micro winery. She has directed and produced theatrical productions, short films, albums, and authored a book titled Speak to My Soul, a montage of voices. Evita has been recognized with numerous awards, including the NAACP Presidential Social Justice Award, YWCA Women of Achievement Award, and Susquehanna Styles Woman of Strength feature. Her creativity and business savvy have been featured in brand campaigns such as Sprite and BET's Black Girls Rock. She has facilitated DEI and anti-bias workshops for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Evita empowers Black creatives through her agency, Speak to My Soul, LLC, and the Soul Tribe, providing resources and opportunities. Her art amplifies unheard stories, promoting healing and liberation. Please welcome Evita Colon.
Wow, thank you so much. And give it up for Rick. That was so beautiful. It was such a beautiful reading. Thank you. Wow, I'm happy to be here. Okay, the podium gives me like this presidential feel, but we're going to make it do what it do. This first piece, I actually wrote this. It's called Speak to My Soul. And I wrote it as the introduction to my play, Speak to My Soul, Montage of Voices. And the very first time I got to perform it was for Lauryn Hill. And that's the day that I felt very confident in becoming a poet. So this is Speak to My Soul for you. I know there's people like me that have potential to be named among the greatest, like Lauryn Hill, Pac, Maya Angelou, and Spike Lee. And it's hard for me to say this, but it doesn't seem likely when I focus my goals where someone else might be. Because God has a plan for me. She speaks to my soul. So I could be the voice of my people until every story is told. For every woman silenced and every African sold. For every Panther jailed and every sister in the mirror hating themselves because the world is so cold. For every Black man that heard, boy, do as you're told. For those that were denied organizations and decided to break the mold. For those that walk these streets every day facing adversities and never choose to fold, I'm voicing your stories. Speak to my soul. Speak to my soul. Speak to my soul. Our generation is unconscious. The ignorance is getting old. From chains to chains of gold will we change to gain control of identities that we lost with our names and lives they stole. I'm voicing our stories. Speak to my soul. Speak to my soul. Speak to my soul. Thank you. This next piece is, you may or may not know, it's the 50th anniversary of hip hop this month. And yes, give it up for hip hop. I always say that hip hop is the love child of spoken word. If you know the history of hip hop, it came from poets spitting over beats. So this is my ode to hip hop, and also a dedication to my father, who was a DJ and a chef and many other things, but he loved music. And this is my ode to him and hip hop. I weighed down on my mother's womb as my father rubbed her black belly without knowing my birth would make tables turn. I was born into institutionalized captivity, soaked in the blood and sweat of my ancestors, carrying the scars of the enslaved. My first cry cut through the thickness of the suffocating atmosphere with ease. I inhaled the limited oxygen with every exhale, restoring life. My heart pumped, percussions of the motherland. My voice carried stories of ancient griots. My voice liberated. They named me hip hop. Thank you. This next piece is a piece that I wrote during the pandemic. I think we all were pretty suffocated with being inside, and we all were in this place of being very reflective. And I wrote, my freedom on paper. So this is called Free. I'm on a midnight coal train to Beale Street. Blues paint somber but reflective moods on the windows. Flashes of my heroes, dead or disappointing. It's like I'm accustomed to loss. It's almost like I became made normalcy of mourning. Sometimes feeling like an imposter where I deserve to be, knowing I deserve this crown, fighting to keep head up high with weight bearing down. It sounds as if I'm complaining of my blessing. No longer investing in people that want attention over change. I want to free them from their chains, but compared to the masters, they act the same, shackled fame. Do we want progress or praise? But I only dwell on that in dark days in a haze of sativa and sage, setting pressures ablaze, self-medicate and create. They say they listen more when it's in lyrics. Now I understand why some drown sorrows, conjuring, drinking spirits, but I find joy in almost being childlike in spirit. Laughter punching through pain, circulating through the sound cloud for the world to hear it. But in the roll of thunder, do you hear my cry? Or do you fear my pain? Thank you. Am I good for one more? Okay, I have one more piece. This piece means a lot to me because I wrote it in a very dark place, but it was just so liberating to be able to voice the things that I was going through in a way that empowers other Black moms. So this is called For Black Moms Who Have Considered Suicide When Strength Isn't Enough. Y'all mind me stepping away from this mic, or is this being recorded? Can I do that? Okay, great, thank you. I would have did that from the beginning. Hi, y'all. They will never get it or understand the feeling of protecting the fruits of 9, 10, 12, 20 hours of labor. Don't do me the favor of telling me how to feel. Don't tell me that the fear of my harvest becoming strange fruit isn't real. Don't tell me in 2023 we're not haunted by the screams of made me feel yet still. We experience PTSD from hashtag filled of young Black kids being violated and killed, no justice. Trauma is filled. This is for the ones that are told they can when they feel they can't. The mothers that hear music in their child's laugh or eat cheese in college feet say still dance. This is for you, mama. I know what it feels like to no longer wish to breathe, tears dripping down cheek with child clenched on knees, suffocated and resuscitated by their needs, the wish to be free from a stigma that won't allow us to wear our hearts on our sleeves, to tell that superwoman complex that we get through it, but we still bleed and we still hurt. When the community is hit, the Black mother feels it first, feeling like no one is coming to our rescue because someone told them that the Black woman is first. The Black woman is a whore, uncivil, unpretty. The Black woman is the worst. The Black woman deserves unwanted advances upskirt, living in the shame of white woman tears with iron fists breaking glass, filling the Black woman out works. The Black woman is dirt. Oh, the Black woman is earth. She's sons and daughters, she's precious. The universe is the Black woman's work, so they capitalize off the Black woman's work, turning our tears into noose, pulled on by society, chair kicked by our youth and Black men that reinforce stereotypes about us being uncouth. White child fed off of our breath, Black child healed by our fruit. White man beg us for sex, Black man disgusted by truth. Black woman fed pills and told pain isn't real. Never allowed to feel, so never given opportunity to heal. Head held high. My character is still. I don't want to compete with my sisters. My happiness with you is real, yet still. We have to teach our children that we are light and we are love. Drugs to believe that everyone else is above, but we are the warmth in the hug. The shelter, the foundation, the backbone, the plug, the healer, the teacher, the public speaker, everything a unicorn is made of. Black mom, bear the weight. Black mom, pick up slack. Black mom, carry the burdens of the world on your back. Black mom is queen. Black mom, stay Black. Peace. I wrote this because I too am a Black mom that has considered suicide when strength isn't enough. I am the color girl that felt like someone has ran away with all of my stuff. I too have felt like I am not enough. Sitting on the cusp of ending a life once traveled, a little rough, feeling shame and guilt and what is up, missing the mark, hitting the mark, stretching the mark, stained on gut. warm, beautiful as the sunshine, but still in the summer sun. Breathing life, being light, energy sucked, feeling like the bearer of the sword, but still feeling the sting of its touch, waiting for its prayers, good juju, or any type of luck while no longer wanting to pray, meditate, or keep your head up, keep on. Sis, you don't always have to be strong, keep on. Sis, you don't have to be strong, keep on. You are needed, everyone else is wrong. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your love and energy. And next, I have the honor of introducing Airea D. Matthews, is a Philadelphia's current poet laureate. Her first collection of poems is the critically acclaimed Simulacra, is that right? Simulacra, my apologies, which won the 2016 Yale Series of Younger Poets Award. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, Gulf Coast, BQR, Best American Poet, Lit Hub, Harvard Review, and elsewhere. Matthews holds a BA in economics from the University of Pennsylvania, as well as an MFA from the Helen Zell Writers Program and an MPA from the Gerald Ford School of Public Policy, both at the University of Michigan. A Pew Fellow, she is a professor and directs the poetry program at Bryn Mawr College. Please put your hands together to welcome Airea D. Matthews to the stage.
Hey, everybody, how you doing? Good. Hopefully by the end of this reading, you'll be doing just equally as well. That's my hope. I'm going to read from Bread and Circus tonight, but before I started, I kind of wanted to give you a little bit of background on how Bread and Circus came to be. One of the things that was important to me, you know how we all have different interests and nobody is a monolith, and so we're very complex beings with nuance, yeah? So I'm a poet, but I'm also interested, I'm a policy wonk. I'm also interested in history. I'm also interested in memoir. I am also interested in failures, like systemic failures. And so I'm constantly asking my questions around those topics that are of interest to me. I also like to knit. I do it poorly, but I like to do that. And so I think all those things came together because one of the things I wanted to do in this collection was to knit these two thinkers together. Because people come up with these amazing theories about how life works and what everything should be and how society should work. So we have Adam Smith, who in 1776 had The Wealth of Nations published. Again, that was the year that the Declaration of Independence was signed. Ben Franklin went to Scotland to go visit this man, so we can thank him for giving us the pillars of capitalism that we know now. He basically authored the free market economy that we operate in, also known as capitalism. And he introduced this concept of the division of labor, which over time became concretized as class. So we know as class. And then there's this other thinker who's on the opposite side of the economic spectrum, Guy Debord. And Guy was a French Marxist. And in 1967, he wrote The Society of the Spectacle. And he was saying, in the way of a futurist, kind of think of him as like a Marshall McLuhan. Marshall McLuhan wrote kind of futurist ideas around what society might look like many years before society actually looked like that. That's how Debord was. He was saying that at some point in this capitalist scheme, we all become a commodity. So I wanted to explore that idea because I wanted to think about it from the perspective of the interstitial spaces. And the interstitial spaces between theories are where people's lives are lived. And so the lived life becomes proof of a theory's validity. So my thought is, why not pull my life into the conversation? So there's these two speakers and I pull my life into the conversation, give you excerpts of Bread and Circus. Legacy costs. And then there are those who, in the words of artist Mendel Black, inherit rebellion. Large lots of unbeing passed one generation to the next. Absent value on the free market, nothing gets resolved. Too many other worries anyhow, the who, what, when, why of living. Elegant names are expensive. It costs too much to be pronounced. nobler yet to forbear the weight of obscurity, put on the full armor of mundane gods who war against their heirs, wasting away among brothers, fattened from lamb. The troubles. Man, you should know that this is based on Bloody Sunday. Man watches his history on the screen with apathy and an occasional passing flicker of horror or indignation. Connor Cruz O'Brien, Irish historian. It's January 1972, and inside Ma's television buzzes. Oddly accented men wearing crucifixes call for work and housing. Children's coattails drag along the seats of burnt out cars, walling in their free dairy. Tanks thrum through the rebel throne. Stones ricochet off umbrella shields. Bullets plunge into some husband's flesh like rose thorns burrowing chest deep. A priest waves a handkerchief as flag of surrender, begging passage for the shallow breath whose blood slicks his boot. Unknowns will die cradled in the arms of strangers who moments earlier sang, "We shall overcome someday," faithfully clinging to the same distant hope that finds Ma thousands of miles away on a different continent, wailing on her bedroom floor. Arms flailed across her belly, mourning an unwanted whose spine swims against her backbone's curve, holding vigil for blood that will not come, and me who surely will. Severance. 200 years after Franklin signed the Declaration of Independence, Amtrak purchased the crumbling stone viaducts and decrepit bridges between Boston and Washington. In 5 years, the federal government would surface 245 miles of track, lay 171,000 ties, renew 2,868 joints, interlock 5,800 switch timbers, and order 492 Amfleet cars, including 16 sleek Metroliners, like one of the two housed at Trenton Rail Station, where the authorities found my father in stuporous nod while on official clock. Having decided several offers of rehab enough, Amtrak severed all contractual encumbrances. It was 1977 when my father stumbled from that station into a recession, but first into Pete Lorenzo's bar to pilfer time through a bottle, then plot provision, 3 square, 4 souls, strategizing who to feed to whom. Smith on Exchange, so you should know this is an excerpt of The Wealth of Nations, and it's written as if it's a palimpsest. Man sometimes uses the same arts with his brethren, and when he has no other means of engaging them to act according to his inclinations, endeavors every servile and fawning attention to obtain their goodwill. Man stands at all times in need of the scarce sufficient, and has almost constant occasion for the vain benevolence. Give me that which I want, and you shall have this which you want. Swindle. Learn the suits, ace. A club looks like a 3-leaf clover. A spade is an upside down heart. A diamond looks like 2 kissing triangles. A heart is a goddamn heart. A hand is 5 cards, 1 card each finger. The ace is the highest, followed by head cards, king, jack, then back by 10. That's the rank. You get what I'm giving? Bring a baby doll, something to play with. Circle the players from afar. Your sneaky Uncle Nate. Nigga tucks cards under his cuff. Pull on his sleeve. Ask for a hug. If it feels stiff, say you're thirsty. Don't crawl under that table unless you want a gun in my mouth. Don't sniff the powder on the felt, and boy, don't touch those chips. They worth more than you. You see what I'm saying? Aim for loose play. Every motherfucker's hungry. When the game is tight, stakes get too fat too quick. You'll lose before the draw. Spy those hands, ace. Tell me what you see. Scratch your chin, rub your nose, pull on your ear. We got a code. Eat. Thing is, that ace is tricky. Hinges on what's held. It can play high or low. A full house ain't shit. Bend the straight, fuck a pair. fear that flush. If you see those head cards in order with the same suit, grab your baby doll, go to the bathroom, flush the toilet twice, stick one finger down your throat, bloat your cheek, run out, force lunch on that table, say, Daddy, my head hurts. We make dust, baby boy, only lose what little you left. Etymology. For Evita. Because my mother named me after a child born still to a godmother I've never met. I took another way to be known, something easier to remember, inevitable to forget, something that rolls over the surface of thrush, because I grew tired of saying, no, it's pronounced. Now I tire of not conjuring that ghost I honor. Say it. Era. Rhymes with Sarah. Sarah from the Latin meaning a woman of high rank, which also means whenever I ask anyone to hold me on their lips, I sound like what I almost am. Hear me. I'm not a D or a river charging through working class towns where union folk cog wedge for plots and barely any house at all, where bosses mangle ethnic phonemes and nobody corrects one word because the check's in the mail. So let's end this classist pretense where names don't matter and language is too heavy a lift. My E is silent like most people should be. The consonant is sonorant. For Evita is a Black woman, or one might say the spine. Thank you for that poem. I translate to wind in a country known for its iron, imply lioness of God in Jesus's tongue, mean apex predator, free of known enemy, fierce enough to harm or fast enough to run. All I'm saying is what I've already said. The tongue has no wings to flee what syllables it fears. The mouth is no womb, has no right to consume what it did not make. For the strength of Black women, thank you so much. You gave me permission to read that when I heard you read your last poem. It was beautiful. We was kings. Been trying to show you history don't change much. There's hard proof erasure exists. What we learn to accept are tidy myths full of men who look unlike me, still people, but not my dad or my uncle who would share stories about a line of Black kings in Scotland. How in 967, Doe the Black, son of Malcolm, was called vehement nigger. Doe was driven from the field by his cousin Cullen next in line. How that king was offed by Doe's brother Kenneth, who looked a lot like Obama if Obama lived in Kirkcaldy in the late 900s. Even then, brothers wilded out in a country that found it suitable to call their kings niggers. This went on until every mud-tongued fisher of sweet bone bread ground to chalk, until the new kings with lighter eyes and narrow features commissioned portraits in which every past heir had a porcelain face. Only the backgrounds had any dark. All those kings who looked familiar, waiting as muted novas in a celestial sea of utter blankness. I'm gonna do a couple of more poems. Kafkaesque. So if you've read Kafka, you know that Kafka, when he was writing, everything was basically about his father. Every story was somehow related to his difficult relationship with his father. Kafkaesque. The real hero in the metamorphosis was Greta, Gregor's sister, who found a way to avoid the snares. Who wants to deliver spoiled milk to a roach every morning? Right now, there's a mouse in my kitchen. I've set down poison, but he's too wise. Whatever he wants, he'll substitute. He can wait for his French Revolution, the guillotine tomorrow, or maybe there's enough to form a union, or maybe they decided when their Hoffa disappeared, they didn't want any more smoke. I figure I'm the FBI to Stuart Little's mafia. They know when I'm trying to frame them. They slink around those traps, find cheese laughable. They get thick on Kool-Aid crystals sunken into the grout, prefer what's sweet to what's savory. They know what they want. smarter than most. See, my desires fleet, but I'll Pavlov dog it every time. Ring the bell, give me a shock. Ring the bell, give me a scrap. Ring the bell, I'll stink bug it. We'll fly to a new wall to meet the same end, crushed by habit. But let's not delve into the mechanics of what's slowly killing me. Today, I'm trying to end this pestilence, and these pests at least know not to fall for the same trap twice. This one's going to be in conversation with Rick's poems about the internet. Cirque du Sims. In this carnival, clowns cluster inside the ringmaster's imagining. They're woke and tired, oppose GMOs and don't know why, eat vegan and have luxury beef, love whoever they want and ghost whoever they don't, act brand new whenever they act, always act. Take copious selfies to recall what they look like through a filter in a visually fortuitous moment. Say, wait, let me video this present suffering. Gather followers like sheep flocks who envy how plastic they're bending, how full on they're fake. First tooth babies they crowned or borrowed for promise of others' pleasure. These vote incapable tickets, pay taxes or don't, drive electric or synthetic, tattoo fill faults, faux for friends, double ends, this or that, flip, flop, hard knuckle dead ends, abolish the hood to free up the market, tar and feather difference, execute nuance on the wheel, town square their public beheadings or McCarthy their cancellations while basking, fallible, under shine of the spotlight. Divine. Two more, and then I'll leave, promise. There's one sort of, oh, this is called Oh Please. There's one sort of labor which adds to the value of the subject upon which it is bestowed. There is another which has no such effect. Oh, labor. Oh, effect. Oh, manufacturer. Oh, material. Oh, profit. Oh, menial. Oh, expense. Oh, general. Oh, servant. Oh, man. Oh, rich. Oh, poor. Oh, particular. Oh, vendible. Oh, occasion. Oh, contrary. Oh, commodity. Oh, trace. Oh, spectacle. Sovereign. Players, buffoons, not purchased nor sold. Nevertheless, at the end of the day, you gotta find some light. Nevertheless, praise to the father holding his sleeping daughter on the 52nd Street trolley. To the daughter dreaming through the pothole from, praise to the diabetic with shorn feet and sugarcane blood, to the anxious nerve through left hip and lower spine, to those flying axons on their routes, praise. To the red-headed Rasta in his ganja-lace t-shirt, to the Vietnam vet at Cass Corridor holding a sign, to the sign which reads, not homeless, just struggling, praise. To the barbers calming the fatherless in their chairs, to the mothers trying not to overhear the soothing to soothing, praise. To raise skylines and ruins to whatever replaces the horizon, to the lost toddler who refused to speak to strangers, to the strangers who would not let him be lost, praise. To sisters in love with whoever won't love them, to others in love with whoever won't bother, praise. To the lovers who left lessons, those lovers who left scars, to the memory of topography, raised surface, smooth to touch, to id's frail shards and ego's fringed edge, praise. To boys who make beeswax fingernails, to little girls who wear fatigues and eye black, praise to those often overlooked, the chronic overlooking, praise. To Miss Toto, Bambi Banks, Pearl Harbor, to bombs that never landed, to satellites that could not be coaxed to Earth, to bodily grail that won't hold a lie, praise, to beauty that doesn't suffer rules, to dollar store chic and sleek vintage tins, to loose wave and tight curl, to wanting to be, to being, praise, to love's revival, to incising shame's jugular, to the unrecalled, misjudged and half remembered, praise. to the hard-won win against Kronos, to the stone wrapped in swaddling, the eaglets nesting latibule, barren sirens rearing urchin, the eye uncrossed, uncrowed, praise. To scuffed boot houses, children running over frayed laces, praise to the old kitchen half gutted, its April gnats and snowbank flies, its mice hugging sweet corners, praise to that which endures, to old doors, layers of paint, years of storm, beating solid oak, to the gable roof that is a ceiling, that coffered ceiling that is also a floor, praise to what shoulders weight, to brackets and load-bearing walls, beams and spindly skeletons, sacred geometry and tangents, to levees and pregnant summers, the buckshot-ridden body wheeling to coil spring, praise to the ground unfastening, to the thorny or fertile soil, to each seraph's flutter wind and every earthworm's bristle entwined in waltz of welcome, praise to the body relenting to dust, the spirit yielding assent, praise to all who rejoice in becoming. Amen to all who rejoice in return. Thank you. Please buy the book if you haven't already. I'm happy to sign it.
We do have time. We do have time for just a little audience Q&A. So if you have a question
If you got
for Airea,
questions, I have potential answers. I never say I have answers.
but feel free to raise your hand and I'll come around with the mic. And I can start us off. Why bread and circus?
My son, the original title was Mundane Gods, and it was based on that entry poem, Legacy Costs. And my son, who was my first reader, he's one of my first readers. He's a brilliant poet and is going to be a scholar, but he's a brilliant mind. And he read it and he said, Mom, this book is really about commodity and spectacle. And so it makes sense that it would be Juvenal's quote, bread and circus, which is the kind of the epigraph that starts off the book. And I'll be damned if he wasn't right. So I changed the title and it became Bread and Circus. Any other questions? Yes.
I was hoping that you would say a little bit more about what you meant about living in the interstitial spaces between theories, but particularly the theories that you chose, the
Yeah.
Adam Smith versus
Yeah.
the French.
Thank you for that
Marxists.
question. I think for me, what it means is that I appreciate theory for what it is, right? And I work in academia, so I have a keen sense of academics coming up with these pristine theories around how society and people work. The reality is that there's a practical aspect to theory, right? There's this idea that if we live according to free market economics, that the invisible hand, which is one of Smith's theories, the high tide raises all boats, right? So self-interest is the key to optimal economic outcomes. And that thought kind of sat with me for years because I was an econ major. So I would listen to this stuff and think, this does not sound accurate, actually. But you know, who am I? I'm an econ student at the time, and I have no right to refute what some man wrote in the 1700s. But my life seemed to insist on something different. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road with theory, is how it's enacted in people's everyday lives, right? Like, is it actionable? Is it useful? Does it work? And so as I was thinking about the invisible hand theory, it occurred to me that self-interest was actually one of my points of trauma. My father was doing something for my family that he thought was in his own interest, right? To be able to do what he thought a father should. And also he was a raging drug addict. He was a heroin addict. So it was really about feeding his heroin addiction, honestly, at the end of the day. And so it seemed like that invisible hand theory actually doesn't work for people who are in poverty or people who have addictions. So I started to think about, when do these theories not actually work? But then I started thinking about Guy Debord. because I was reading The Society of the Spectacle and I was fascinated by it because there's a lot of good literature from the 60s where they're talking about exactly the time that we're in right now. And it occurred to me that Guy came up with this group called the Situationists. He was at the founder of the group, the Society of the Spectacles, kind of like its tome that led the group. And in that, he wrote about détournement, and I'm terrible at French, so I'm not going to say that right. But it really is the hijacking of a cultural artifact, the idea that you can hijack a cultural artifact. And it was a resistance to capitalism. So I thought, well, how can I hijack Adam Smith's work? And so that's what I did. And then I kind of wanted to give a hat tip to Guy. So I put him in there too. And I started hijacking his work because I'm doing exactly what the Situationists would have wanted in order to kind of subvert the ideas of capitalism. So that's where it came in, and thinking about the lived life as kind of proof of the theory. I know that that's not a very academic answer because academics are supposed to be very objective. And we're supposed to look from afar, but I can't look at my own life from afar. That leads to dissociation and exactly the kind of things that ultimately hurt rather than help. Yeah, thank you for that question.
Any other questions?
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
2 more.
Last.
That's a great question. I think I also want to say the book is a self-indictment. I don't think that I'm treated like a commodity by others. I feel like I do it to myself. And it's by participating, anybody who willfully participates in kind of the social media circus, you're making yourself a commodity. You're making yourself usable to people who can profit off of you. And so I think to the degree that I'm a human, yes, I'm making myself into a commodity. Willingly, truly. Yeah, I do.
And this will be our last question.
Just wanted to know if you could talk a bit about what you teach. What do you teach and what are some of the favorite things on your syllabi?
That's a great question. Thank you. It's one of my favorite questions. The other favorite question is, how are you doing? I love teaching absurdist lit. So people like Sartre and Camus, Albert Camus. I have a real interest in absurdist lit because I think that it kind of navigates the balance between complete and utter nihilism and hope, especially Camus. He's really into this idea of, I mean, it could be utterly useless, but do it anyway. So I like teaching my students that mostly because I want to see how they're in dialogue with it. But the other thing that I do is I have poetry workshops. So I teach poetry workshops and I use a trauma-informed model for teaching poetry workshops. And I say it's trauma-informed because too many times I've seen people with real talent leave the poetry business, if you will, or leave the craft of the art making because people don't know how to talk to each other in those workshops and they feel discouraged. And that for me is a point of trauma. If you have real talent and you're turned away from the thing that you're actually very good at doing, that's incredibly unfortunate. So I run all of my workshops with a trauma-informed model so that none of my students leave feeling that way. I want every one of my students, regardless of their level of craft, regardless of their talent, regardless of whether they want to continue to do this work or not, to feel as if they can do the work. They have the tools to do the work. They just have to do the work. And I think that's the difference between a writer and someone who doesn't write. It's just doing the work. It's the practice of writing. It's an actual practice. Yeah, thank you.
We give one more round of applause for Airea D. Matthews.
Thank you so much, y'all. Thank you for coming out. Happy to sign books.
Last couple notes from me. Bread and Circus is available up at the cafe counter if you'd like to purchase a copy. We also have, once again, Evita Colon's magazine, Black Voices, up at the cafe counter.